Today we're going to take a look at the introduction and biography as written in the Penguin Classics Epictetus Discourses. Here we're going to get a whole update on what Epictetus was all about. There's not as much known about him as the other philosophers, but what we can unpack from his history is found here. Let's get into it. At the beginning of the 2nd century AD, in the reign of the Emperor Trajan, a group of young men could be found studying philosophy at the boarding school of Nicopolis, a Roman colony in Epirus, northwest Greece. They were students of Epictetus. In a prefatory letter, one such pupil, Arrian by name, takes credit for committing a sizable number of Epictetus's lessons to print, thereby ensuring their survival. These are the Discourses. Arrian is also credited with preparing a digest of his master's thought, the Manual, or in Greek, Enchiridion. A modest number of fragments attributed to Epictetus have also come down to us, some of them derived from discourses otherwise lost, as only 4 books of the 8 that Arrian originally published are extant. Besides being an uncommonly diligent stenographer, Arrian was an author in his own right, best known for his biography of Alexander the Great. He was also a man of the world, a Roman consul, and later legate to the Roman province of Cappadocia. Taking into account his own literary aspirations and the formidable challenges posed by transcribing Epictetus's lectures live, i.e., as they were being delivered, some have questioned whether his opening letter is completely trustworthy in characterizing the collection as nothing less than a verbatim record of what the philosopher said, inside and outside the classroom. Most students of the Discourses incline to the view that in the process of effecting the transition of Epictetus's lectures to print, Arrian probably permitted himself a few editorial changes. Established in the dramatic context of the Discourses, in imitation of Plato's Socratic dialogues, may be one of his contributions. But any alterations or improvements he made to the text are unlikely to have been extensive. The books of history and geography that Arrian wrote later are so unlike the Discourses in style and content that even if he did not have his word for it, he would be unlikely to conclude that they were products of the same hand. Arrian published the edition of the Discourses soon after Epictetus died, and an unauthorized edition had already been in circulation, so other Epictetus students were in a position to judge how faithful Arrian was to the actual words of the master, and he have no record of anyone impugning their essential honesty. On the contrary, Arrian's collection was accepted immediately as an authentic and definitive record of Epictetus' thought, and even though Arrian was responsible for actually writing the book, Epictetus is conventionally and rightfully treated as their author. Even if we cannot be sure that Epictetus actually said everything attributed to him in the Discourses, or in those exact words, we have no reason to doubt that the bulk of the material does derive from what Arrian and others heard while seated at the master's feet. Details of Epictetus's life are sketchy. The Discourses themselves are our richest source of information. You can only make an educated guess as to the year he was born and the year he died, but are not likely to be far wrong in giving his dates as 55 AD to 135. We know that he was born into slavery because he tells us so, and from an ancient inscription we learn that his mother had been a slave. The place of his birth was Hierapolis, a major Greco-Roman city in what today is southwestern Turkey. The native language there was Greek, the Koine or common Greek that derived from the language of classical Athens, but became widely disseminated into simplified form during the Hellenistic era. The Discourses, our principal source, are knowledge of Koine Greek, as is the Greek New Testament, to cite another example. More than once Epictetus refers to himself as a lame old man, but nowhere elaborates on the cause of his disability. 2 traditions independent of the Discourses give competing accounts. Early Christian authors report that a sadistic master was responsible for rendering him crippled for life, but others interpret lame old man as almost a pleonistic phrase, which is to say that he may have suffered from rheumatism or arthritis as a natural consequence of his advance in age. The later explanation is in fact the more likely. We know who his owner was. His name was Epictetus, and Epictetus makes mention of him several times, not exactly in complimentary terms, but not with any hint of bitterness either. Epictetus is famous for more than just being Epictetus' master. A former slave himself, after manumission, he rose to the position of Nero's secretary in charge of petitions. Later, he would serve Domitian in the same capacity. Descriptions of life at court frequently appear in the Discourses, in terms detailed and vivid enough to suggest that his service to Epictetus acquainted Epictetus at first hand with the manners, routines, and attitudes of the emperor and his courtiers. We can go further and speculate that in this equivocal position, a slave on the one hand, but also a privileged member of the emperor's inner circle, Epictetus came to appreciate in full the ambiguities of power and learned to distinguish real freedom from counterfeit. This dialectic of freedom and slavery colors much of the presentation of Stoic thought. That Epictetus allowed Epictetus considerable freedom of movement and association is implied by his attendance at the lectures of Musonius Rufus. Tacitus, a contemporary Roman historian, describes Musonius as the foremost Stoic of his day. We are fortunate that a sample of his lectures was included in an anthology of morally dignified readings, such as the Suda, which still survives. Musonius gives lessons in practical ethics on particular questions such as whether women should have allowed to study philosophy, or what relationship ideally obtains between a husband and a wife. While he does not engage the same topics, Epictetus in Discourses displays a similar focus and orientation. Both men concentrate on ethics to the virtual exclusion of physics and logic. Logic and physics feature in the Discourses, to be sure, but typically in an ancillary or illustrative role. And neither one gets caught up in ethical theorizing. They always treat ethics with a view of applying it in real life. Reading books and becoming fluent in the doctrines of philosophers are deprecated as ends in themselves. Even more than Musonius, Epictetus has a plain and practical agenda. He wants his students to make a clean break with received patterns of thinking and behaving, to reject popular morality and put conventional notions of good and bad behind them. In short, he aims to inspire in his readers something like a religious conversion, only not by appeal to any articles of faith or the promise of life in the hereafter. Stoics did not believe in the afterlife, but by appeal to reason alone. Epictetus granted Epictetus his freedom, precisely when we don't know, but from then on he devoted his life to the practice and preaching of philosophy. When Domitian, suspecting them of republican sympathies, in AD 95, ordered all the philosophers in Italy to pack up and leave, Epictetus turned this insult to account by moving to Greece and founding his school there, in a spot where he had probably little to fear in the way of competition. Nicopolis, the site he chose, was a Roman colony founded by the Emperor Augustus to commemorate his victory over Antony and Cleopatra. It functioned as the de facto capital of the province of Epirus. The site had other advantages. It was on the Adriatic coast, making it easy for access for prospective students from Italy. The student body drew mainly from upper-class Roman families who admired Greek culture and were particularly keen to taste the accumulated wisdom of the Greek philosophers. He had no information as to how long students typically stayed at Nicopolis under Epictetus' tutelage, but it is probably no more than a year or two. The school, in any case, was a success, and when his reputation attracted the attention of the Emperor Hadrian, more kindly disposed toward philosophy than his predecessor, he honored it and its founder with a personal visit. Tradition has it that late in life Epictetus retired from teaching and withdrew to the peace and quiet of family life under conditions imposed by old age. That is, he became a parent by adoption rather than fathering a child, and took into his home a female servant to serve as a kind of surrogate mother to the child and domestic servant for himself. That he had absent himself from family life for so long shows that he regarded philosophy as a jealous mistress who demanded practically all his time and attention, which family life would not allow. That this renunciation of family life represented a real sacrifice is suggested by the fact that he took to his immediately upon retiring. He evidently thought he earned the comforts of home after devoting most of his life to improving the lives of others, the successive generations of students who had passed through his school. We have no more news of Epictetus beyond this. After creating his version of a family, he was evidently content to settle into it and live out the balance of his years in obscurity. And if you like that video, then you can always check out my book that talks about those issues and many more to help you through some of the hard times in your life. It's got a title so edgy, I'm not even sure if I can say it on YouTube. So check it out in the description, and as always, stay tuned for more videos to help you through those hard times, as well as liking, commenting, and subscribing for all that other fun stuff with the algorithm, you know? Yeah, like, subscribe, write a little comment about how I'm silly or whatever. Do it. Do it now. Yeah, there you go. Wasn't so hard to do, right?